Hello everyone, I'm from Group 3 and I'd like to introduce to you our topics for today. First one is globalization as an economic phenomenon. The second topic will be the impact of globalization on communication. Third aspect is intercultural communication. Fourth is varieties of English. And lastly will be language varieties or English registers. So for our facilitators, it will be led by Mr. Barrientos, Ms. Cazon, Ms. Espejo, Mr. Reyes, Ms. Tuano, Mr. Vicente, and Ms. Verzosa. So without further ado, let's begin the discussion.
So let's go to the topic. I'm glad that you are here with me. I'm Ramuel Abarrientos and I'm gonna discuss globalization as an economic phenomenon. So let's go for the definition first. Globalization, according to Shankwan, can be characterized as the rising scope of cross-border trade in commodities and services, the movement of international capital, and the wide and rapid spread of technology, all of which are causing world economies to become increasingly interconnected. It represents the unstoppable tendency in global economic development at the millennium's turn, which is the ongoing expansion and reciprocal integration of market borders. The two fundamental driving forces behind economic globalization are the fast increasing relevance of information in all forms of productive activities as well as marketization. To put it another way, the recent rapid globalization of the world's economy is owing in part to rapid breakthroughs in science and technology, and it has emerged from an environment in which the market economic system has been rapidly spreading over the world. So, to deepen more our knowledge about globalization, I will discuss the advantage and disadvantage of globalization. So, for advantage of globalization, firms gain a competitive edge as a result of globalization since they may obtain low-cost raw materials from all over the world. Because of globalization, businesses can take advantage of lower labor costs in developing countries while utilizing the technical capabilities and knowledge of more established economies. Globalization does not come without downsides. So for the disadvantage of globalization, there are winners and losers in any transition, and those who reside in town where jobs are routinely outsourced overseas suffer the most. This effectively means that workers in developed countries must compete for jobs with workers in lower cost markets. Unions and workers may be unable to defend against employers that provide the option of accepting lower pay or losing jobs to a lower cost labor market supplier. So to continue our discussion, here is Ms. Iana Cazon to continue our discussion. Thank you.
The impact of globalization on communication. Global communication is directly affected by the process of globalization and helps to increase business opportunities, remove cultural barriers, and develop a global village. Both globalization and global communication have changed the environmental, cultural, political, and economic elements of the world. Globalization creates greater opportunities for firms in less industrialized countries to tap in and more larger markets around the world. Effects of globalization. As technology advances, the world is both getting larger and smaller. Today, we are able to communicate people across the world at the touch of a button. While globalization or communication between nations beyond their borders is an old concept. With the onset of recent technology, globalization is impacting the ways we communicate and learn in fascinating ways. Trade. There is a global trade network that makes just about anything produced in the world accessible to you. Information. The Internet is a global information network that makes just about all information in the world accessible to you. But now, you can watch news, videos, and movies from around the world either by YouTube, satellite, or local TV. Travel. There is a global travel network where you can be nearly anywhere in the world by tomorrow. And lastly is peace. We live in a world that is very peaceful compared to any previous period of time in history because of globalization. In the past, war was seen as a good way to obtain wealth for your country. Now, no country has to go to war in order to obtain necessary resources. Diplomacy and negotiation have replaced war for those who choose peace. Is it good or bad? The result of globalization and communication are positive but in some cases negative also. Globalization has helped people communicate better with one another and find out new things. Moreover, as people learn new culture and heritage and the sense of unity is developed.
Good day everyone, I'm Christina Andrea B. Versosa and I'm going to discuss the following topics under intercultural communication. Culture, transmission of culture, the two cultural theories, and the importance of culture in communication. Culture, as defined by De Vito, 2012, consists of relatively specialized elements of a group's way of life that are passed down from generation to generation through communication rather than genes. Thereby, the word culture does not refer to the skin color or the appearance of a person because these are the characteristics passed down through genes instead of communication. Culture is everything that a group's members have created and developed, particularly their values, beliefs, artifacts, language, ways of behaving and thinking, art, laws, religion, communication theories, styles, and attitudes. We often use sex and gender interchangeably, but these two have different concepts. Sex is determined by genetics. It refers to the biological and physiological differences between men and women. On the other hand, gender, as defined by the World Health Organization 2010, is a socially structured role and behavior that society assigns to males and females. Gender identities are important aspects of culture because they shape how people live their lives within a family as well as in the larger community. Thus, the way we behave as a man or a woman is because of what culture has taught us about how men and women must act. Moving on, there are two transmission of culture. The first one is enculturation. It is the process by which we learn the culture from birth. Here, culture is mostly taught by our parents, peer groups, schools, religious institutions, and government entities. Some examples of enculturation are visible in Filipino culture, such as the attending of Mass every Sunday and the pagmamano or kissing the elder's head on the forehead as a sign of respect. Second, acculturation is a slightly different way of learning culture. It is the process of acquiring the rules and conventions of a culture other than your own when you come into contact with a new and different culture. For example, a Filipino speaks the Filipino language with his Filipino family and the English language with his international friends. So there are two considered theories of culture. The first one is cultural evolution, or also known as the social Darwinism. According to this theory, cultures evolve in the same way that humans evolve. Hence, some culture may be considered advanced, while others may be considered primitive. To further explain, tattoos were used in some cultures to mark those from lower social class in order to keep them down in society. Tattoos in today's culture have begun to take on similar form, with young people getting them as a fashion statement. Second, cultural relativism. As defined by Berry, Portinga, Segal, and Dassen, 1992, all cultures are unique, but no culture is superior or inferior to any other. However, this does not suggest that all cultural practices are equal or that you must acknowledge all cultural practices evenly. For instance, people have become more accepting of food from cultures other than their own. People used to find certain foods unacceptable, but now they are less likely to judge others based on their food choices. The importance of culture in communication. First, demographic changes. The US was once predominantly populated by Northern Europeans, but now it is heavily influenced by the influx of new residents from Central and South America, Africa, and Asia. With these changes, there came new customs and the need to understand and adapt to new ways of communicating. Second, cultural sensitivity. We've grown more aware of cultural diversity as individuals. We're more concerned with respectful communication and creating a society in which all cultures can live in harmony. The ability to successfully communicate with people of other cultures commonly equates to financial benefit. Third, economic interdependency. Most countries are currently economically dependent on one another, and our economic well-being is heavily reliant on the well-being of other cultures. Business opportunities are becoming more diverse as a result of this interconnectedness among cultures and people. All of this makes cultural awareness and intercultural communication skills essential for professional survival and growth. Fourth, communication technology. Foreign and sometimes very different cultures have invaded our living room thanks to the rapid expansion of communication technology. You may now send emails to people in Europe and Asia just as effortless as you do to those in your neighborhood. And of course, intercultural communication is now as simple as typing a note on your computer. Fifth, politeness. Politeness is likely common across all civilizations. Therefore, we don't truly have polite and impolite societies. The rules for showing politeness or impoliteness vary by culture. Politeness includes not interrupting, saying please and thank you, maintaining eye contact, and asking permission to do something. These various kinds of polite greeting serves as a good illustration of the various ways cultures indicate politeness. Last, communication competence. Communication competence varies by culture. What works effectively in one culture may not work well in another. Corporate executives in United States, for example, get right down to the business during the first few minutes of the meeting. In contrast, corporate executives in Japan socialize for extended periods to learn more about one another. The next topic will be discussed by Mr. John Alfred Reyes.
Thank you, Ms. Bersosa. I'm here to discuss cultural difference. What is contained here? First is an individual and collective orientation. Individual ideals such as power, achievement, hedonism, and stimulation are emphasized in an individualist culture. A collectivist culture, on the other hand, instills in its members the value of collective ideals like benevolence, traditions, and conformity. The degree to which an individual's or a group goals are given greater prominence is one of the major contrasts between these two orientations. Of course, you undoubtedly have both individualist and collectivist impulses, so these aims aren't mutually exclusive. For the second, high and low context of culture. Much of the information in communication in a high context culture is in the situation or in the individual. The majority of information in a low context culture is stated openly in the spoken message. It will be stated in written or contract form in formal transactions. For the third, power distances. There are huge variations in power between people in high power distant culture. Power is more evenly distributed among the population in low power distant cultures. Fourth, masculine and feminine cultures. Aggressiveness, material prosperity, and strength are valued in a highly masculine culture. Modesty, concern for relationship and the quality of life, and sensitivity are valued in a largely feminine culture. For the fifth, high and low ambiguity tolerant cultures. High ambiguity tolerant cultures feel little threatened by uncertainty. It's accepted as it comes. Low ambiguity tolerant cultures feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and seek to avoid it. For the sixth, long and short-term orientation. Long-term cultures emphasize the value of future benefits, whereas short-term cultures emphasize the importance of immediate gratification. Lastly, indulgence and restraint. Cultures with a high level of indulgence emphasize the fulfillment of desires. They place a premium on having fun and enjoying life. These cultures have a higher proportion of happy people, which is determined by two major factors. Life control, the feeling of freedom that you can do whatever you want. Leisure, the feeling that you have free time to do whatever you want. On the other hand, cultures with a high level of restraint encourage the curbing of such gratification and its regulation by social norms. People in restrained cultures are more unhappy. They see themselves as having little or no control over their lives and having little or no leisure time to get involved in enjoyable events. Let's proceed on the nature and forms of intercultural communication. Intercultural communication is when people diverse cultural views, values, or ways of behaving communicate with one another. Here is the model of intercultural communication. It illustrates that culture is a part of every communication transaction. This diagram illustrates two-way communication process between two different cultured individuals. The individuals from different cultures create shared meaning as they communicate with each other. Here is the types of intercultural communication. First, communication between people of different national cultures. Second, communication between people of different races, sometimes called interracial communication. Third, communication between people of different ethnic groups, sometimes called interethnic communication. Fourth, communication between people of different religions. Fifth, communication between nations, sometimes called international communication. 6. Communication between genders. Lastly, communication between smaller cultures existing within the larger culture. For improving intercultural communication, I will define first cultural sensitivity, ethnocentrism, and stereotyping. Cultural sensitivity is an attitude and a manner of acting that recognizes and respects cultural differences. Ethnocentrism, our tendency to assess our own culture's beliefs, attitudes, and values positively, while adversely evaluating those of other cultures. Stereotyping is the tendency to form and hold fixed, unchanging impression about groups of individuals, and to use this impression to assess individual members of this group, while neglecting distinctive individual qualities. Intercultural communication have a guidelines for more effective. Intercultural communication provides the ability to deal with people from different cultures. It is becoming increasingly vital as communication is effective when the recipient understands the message as the sender intended. For this reason, it is important to learn some guidelines for more effective intercultural communication. Here is the guidelines. Prepare yourself. Recognize and reduce your ethnocentrism. Confront your stereotypes. Be mindful. Avoid over-attribution. Recognize differences. Adjust your communication. And that is all. For the next reporters, here is Miss Tuano and Miss Espejo. Take it away.
There are many varieties of English used around the world, and it is critical to understand the development of the English language in Asian countries. We all know that English language has a big impact in the Philippines and has been spoken by 14 million Filipinos. English language became the country's second most widely used dialect as it was implemented to be used as a medium of instruction. As globalization spread throughout the world, English became the primary language in Southeast Asia. Learning a foreign language has become mandatory in order to communicate with the native speakers, whether it's for their profession or for the sake of acquiring knowledge through English. It is true that the gap between native speakers and non-native speakers is narrowing. That's why we need to learn more about people from different cultural backgrounds if we are to understand them.
A person's background with the English language varies according to their culture and locations. We use different varieties of language to suit different communication contexts. The varieties of English are important in both oral and written contexts. By having the idea of it, a person will easily know how to suit and be understood even by other people who have different accents or cultures. With the help of the varieties, the writer and speaker will gain knowledge about the participants' beliefs or interests, which will result in the understanding between them and their audience. Varieties of English are important in both oral and written contexts because they necessitate sensitivity due to the large number of audiences with different cultures and beliefs. A message should be executed properly without the possibility of disrespecting others, just because a writer and or speaker are ignorant of the beliefs of others. The number of settlers, the relationship of regional dialects with this group, contact with other groups, the possibility of pidgins, and eventually the formation of Creole in foreign locations all influence the shape of these post-colonial varieties. All countries that have been colonized have been affected in some way. The most affected part is their grammatical feature. They start constructing sentences or phrases that can be understood by others. In the country of India, the English language is so powerful that it becomes part of their lives. It is the language they use to work. Their legal system is dominated by the English language. Colonization results in the merging of different languages and the unique way of learning how to communicate using pictures. Proceeding with the word Englishes. The plural Englishes emphasize that the language belongs to those who speak it as a first or second language, whether in its standard form or a localized version. Word Englishes include at least three types of varieties. First, those used as the primary language of a country's majority population. such as American and British. Second, use as an additional language for international or intranational communication in multilingual communities, such as Indian, Nigerian, and Singaporean. And third, use almost exclusively for international communications, such as Brazilian, Chinese, and German.
Next is how the Philippine English differs from other varieties. When it comes to pronunciation, it is syllable timed following the rhythm of the local languages. Its certain polysyllables have distinctive patterns. Intonation is widely characterized as sing-song. Educated Filipinos aim at an American English accent but have varying success with the vowel contrast. Few Filipinos have the AE in American English accent mask. Instead, they use A as in American English accent. The distinction between SZ and SH and ZH is not made. Interdental are often rendered as TD so that three of these is spoken as three of these. Next is the vocabulary words. Vocabulary words may vary across the world, especially in its pronunciation, tone, and etc. The varieties of English in Asian context are more profound than what you think. For example, the word kilig has been added to the Oxford English Dictionary since 2016, as for it has no direct translation of it. Kilig is a Tagalog word that came from the country Philippines. It is an adjective that's used to describe a feeling of romantic excitement. Another great example of these is the word tycoon. The word was originated in Japan and it was later used by the Westerns to refer to the gunshots. It was now referred to a very wealthy person or a very important one. Lastly, the word gungho. The word originated from Chinese gonghe, meaning to work together. This was later used as enthusiastic and eager to fight, especially in war by the Americans. It was used in the Second World War as a slogan by the U.S. Marines. Next, when it comes to grammar, the following features occur at all social levels. First is the loss of the singular inflection of verbs, use of present perfect for simple past, use of the continuous tenses for habitual aspect, use of the present forms of auxiliary verbs in subordinate noun clauses rather than past forms and vice versa. An apparent reversal of the norms for the use of the definite article, and verbs that are generally transitive used intransitively. Lastly is when it comes to written models. Local speech tends to be based on written models. Filipinos generally speak the way they write, in a formal style based on Victorian prose models. Style is not differentiated, and the formal style in general use has been called the classroom compositional style. When style differentiation is attempted, there may be effects that are comical for the point of view of a native speaker of English.
Hello, I am Honesty Vicente and I am assigned to discuss language registers of English. So right off the bat, I will start by asking you a pretty simple question. How do we choose our words? How about our voice tone? Or the way we are careful with our sentence structure? So for this part of the discussion, we will be answering these questions. So before we head on to what language registers are, it is important to first discuss the basics. What is a language? So in the exact words of famous linguist David Crystal, 2008, it is the systematic, conventional use of sounds, signs, or written symbols in human society for communication and self-expression. So it is the medium and method to how we communicate. But it isn't an absolute thing. It can vary from situation to situation, hence the need to have language registers. So to provide a general idea of what language registers are, let's have this simple demonstration. Suppose you encounter your professor in a mall. So which is the most appropriate thing to say from the options that we have here? So the obvious answer is, of course, letter C. In the next following slides, we will be learning why. Defined by David Crystal, language registers is the variety of language defined according to its use in social situations. It is the level of formality of language which one speaks. So, in every situation, there is an appropriate level of formality. It can change the way we choose our words, structure, choice of topic, and even our body language. So, this variety of language depends on the social location, topic, purpose, and audience. By being aware of these registers, we can better avoid any risk for miscommunication. So, what are the language registers I speak of? So, we have 5 types of language registers. The first is the frozen or static register. So, as implied by the name, it is a pre-made written or oral approach to communication that does not change. Some few examples are Panatang Makabayan, the Philippines Constitution, and etc. Next is we have formal/academic register. So now this one is usually used in academic or in legal settings. When speaking, the speaker's tone focuses on being detailed and direct, while at the same time remaining to be respectful and neutral. It focuses on facts and grammatical correctness by being strict with the grammar system. When speaking or writing in this register, one must avoid using contractions. So instead of using can't, use cannot. Instead of using wouldn't, use would not. And many more. It is also encouraged to spell out numbers that are less than 100. Another guide is to write in third-person point of view, as it is more objective, making the speaker or writer seem a more credible source in professional and academic settings. Next is to avoid using too much passive voice. It is an important practice to use active voice instead, where the noun or pronoun is the actor instead of being the recipient. An example would be, instead of saying the dragon was slain by the hero and the princess was rescued, we could say in active voice, the hero slew the dragon and rescued the princess. Another tip is to avoid using slang, idioms, exaggerations, and cliches. Also to avoid abbreviations and acronyms, for these can avoid misunderstandings since not all will be able to understand them. And lastly, use transition words such as however, in addition, although, and nevertheless. Avoid using transition words such as like, but, so, and also. The usual examples of formal registers are in academic writing, presentations, and etc. Next is we have consultative register. Now, in this register, this is used in a professional setting. When conversing with a superior or someone who has a specialized knowledge in. Similar to formal register, the expected tone is respectful, but with the use of titles such as doctor, engineer, and etc. Examples of use are when talking to your boss for a raise, when between a tutor and a student, or when visiting a dentist. You are having a consultation, so consultative register. Next, we have informal/casual register. So this is best described as the opposite of formal register. So used when speaking or writing to people you know very well and can be casual with. In this register, the speaker speaks in a conversational and emotive manner. Contrary to formal, the speaker is allowed to use slangs and cliches, figurative language, symbols and abbreviations, acronyms, incomplete sentences, short sentences, can use any point of view, and jokes. So, examples of use of informal/casual register are in when talking to your friends, at a party, or at a family reunion. And lastly is we have the intimate register. In intimate register, this is used when speaking to someone you have a very close and have deep connection with, such as your lover, children, siblings, or your parents. The differences of the five mentioned language registers can be classified into three. According to another linguist, Michael Halliday, we have three key factors in context that affect the choices we make from the language systems. It is referred to as field, tenor, and the mode. Starting off with field, it may be analyzed in terms of social context and the communicative aim in which the text is produced. So for example, you presented something in a university. Our language choices will vary depending on matters such as the course syllabus of the class of which you are presenting to, and the topic in focus. For example, is how our language differ in science as compared to in history class. Next is we have the tenor. So described in terms of the roles of that the writers and readers are expected to play, as well as the cultural values that both shares to one another. It will be affected by matters such as status, level of expertise, age, ethnic background, and gender of the audience. For example, is speaking to your professor being different to how you communicate with a close friend. Lastly is we have the mode. Now, this refers to the channel of communication being used. So specifically the mode and the medium. It is the difference between the spoken and the written mode. For example, it's the difference of the oral language used by students to speak to one another when they are in a park or somewhere outside school, as opposed with their written language in an academic setting when they are writing for a school essay. So moving on to the register, genre, and styles. So these three terms are the three different perspectives on text varieties. So these perspectives are essential elements when analyzing varieties of a text. So linguist David Crystal analyzes the three. So we have style versus register. When comparing style and register, style is described as the level of formality to a particular interpersonal social situation, which is reflected by the changing use of a language. So in style, you take into account your relationship with the participant. So an example would be is the difference when talking to a close friend as compared to speaking to a superior. So while in register on the other hand, you disregard the status of the participant. The level of formality is only defined by the certain social setting at hand. Moving on to genre versus register is though the two are often used interchangeably, they still have a primary difference. Genre is more related to the organization of culture. While register, on the other hand, is more concerned with the context of the communication situation at hand rather than the general culture. Thus, meaning it puts more importance to the field mode tenor framework that we discussed earlier. So, learning about the five language registers can help us reduce the risk of having a communication breakdown. What is a communication breakdown? So, it is the failure to properly convey information due to misuse of communication that results in misunderstanding. So, below are some other ways we can avoid or cope with it. So, first is we have to be emotionally aware. We need to understand the point of view of the recipient or the person we are speaking to. We need to learn how to read the room and be mindful of the recipient's emotions, what the recipient is trying to say, and respond in the most appropriate way. Next is we need to slow down when speaking. Instead of saying the first thing that pops into our head, give yourself some time to compose what you're going to say and how you are going to say it. Lastly is we need to stay calm. The moment you experience a communication breakdown, it can feel frustrating, unable to properly convey your message. If you panic, things may get worse and start talking without minding your thoughts. So it's best to take a deep breath and rethink what you're about to say. And that will be it for our presentation. I hope you learned a lot from us. And before finishing, I would like to leave a quote by our most referenced linguist, David Crystal. The only language which do not change are dead ones. That will be all. Thank you.